Hello and welcome to the latest recording of the SF Masterworks read along series. We are on book like 100 or something. No, we're not quite that far. What are we? Book 32 of
32.
the books in the publication order. We are at, you'll probably know this if you've clicked on the video, it is Dr. Bloodmoney, which, by a little known author called Philip K. Dick. Oh, you have a Dick Pendium there? That's
Yes, I do. This is a
that's
library
interesting.
companion. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably like the sixth book I think we've written or read by PKD at this stage, maybe five,
Yeah.
six, something like that. It is a lot. He is the most prolific author within this series so far that we've read, and I'm sure we'll get into how straightforward and not enhanced it was by anything outside nature, I would imagine at that stage. But I'm here with usual crew. Jared, who's still the only now the only person to have been to every single discussion, I think. Am I
Really?
correct? I think so. I don't think you've missed one.
Wow.
That's unbelievable. So Jared's here from the Fantasy Thinker. And we have Lily here from Ballady Magazine and from the Patreon forums themselves. And you have me here as well. And we have apologies from some of our other regular contributors, Barsha and Susanna. But we are here to talk about Dr. Bloodmoney, which has a subtitle of How We Get Along After the Bomb, both of which were marketing references to the Stanley Kubrick film. So the name of this book was changed to Dr. Bloodmoney because of Dr. Strangelove and how stop worrying about the bomb or whatever the subtitle of Dr. Strangelove is. It's because they thought it would help it sell better, and it maybe explains a little bit this cover version that we have. Like, I sort of wanted to start with this. This artwork on the SF Masterwork is strange for this book. I would have thought Hoppy Harrington would have been the main character of it, but we have our astronaut up in space and a rather strange characterization of that. So we'll start with high level thoughts in general from Dr. Bloodmoney, the book. We'll start with Layla because I feel like we do a bit of private rating in these before we start talking, and then often adjust them after the discussions. So Layla, you've went quite high for this. What are your high level thoughts?
High level thoughts. I am calling it a masterwork. That's one step down from epic. But I think, the reasons are because of the different characters, and that's not to say there might be some characterization questions I would have, but at the same time, I thought his characters and the role they're playing and what they symbolize, I think it all came together really well.
Mm-hmm.
And for that time, and even now, kind of some unique twists. So yeah, that's my high level response.
Interesting. Jared, where do you fall on the PKD love train here?
Yeah. Well, this I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. I had a good time reading it. I winced a lot in some areas of the book, and but when you get past that, I'm just like, yeah, you know what, this is pretty cool. It's funny how it turns into, from one type of novel to the next. Um, there's no when it becomes a post-apocalyptic novel, it has that echo of Earth Abides,
Mm-hmm.
that recovery period after the apocalypse. It kind of skips over the horror of the immediate apocalypse and kind of skips ahead and gives you that rebuilding phase. And I've always enjoyed how different people approach that, and so um, he kind of glosses over it and he kind of makes it a little nicer than a lot of other post-apocalyptic stuff. And but his I don't know, his use of handicap is kind of bothersome,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that his veering into uh, kind of magic land a little bit is really not that well explained. Um, you know, and so it was kind of, it was hard to take that aspect of it and give it any real credence, I guess. Like the suspension of disbelief wasn't there for me. And his writing is very good in this book. Like he was like, I think it even says in the introduction to my copy here that he was definitely on drugs when he wrote this. And I think he just had some kind of flow going when it came to the actual prose. And I think it's like the story flows very well, from one chapter to the next, and it has a nice rhythm to it, um, and I think that works highly in its favor. Some of the incongruencies of how all this stuff works, I don't think mattered to his drugged out mind at the time, and so, um, and so, you have on the one hand something that's kind of pleasant to read, and the other hand something that doesn't quite make sense, but it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's pretty accurate across the board. It On the plus side for me, it has a lot of characters, and for a novel of this length, it probably on the face of it would have too many characters, but it does a good job of actually each person have their own role within society, and so they kind of fit archetypes rather than necessarily just being another person in the community, which I think's really masterful actually in balancing the amount of characters that we have in here. And it's almost as if he wrote a normal story, post-apocalyptic story about the aftermath of bombs going off in the community building and the kind of reliance on building community and communication and all that kind of stuff. And then he went and smoked something, ingested something, and did that. And then I sprinkled on a couple of extra little special bits, because we do have not only the character of Hoppy, which, at the start of it is sort of portrayed as disabled, but also as magic in this way, this kind of the fixing of things and the way that he can do things. And then you have the baby demon fetus thing that comes along with it as well, which again, a bit like you said, it's not really explained. I just think the idea of nuclear fallout is doing an awful lot of heavy lifting in this story. You're right. And the kind of unexplained kind of things that are going on there. And as we often say, these books are often about the time. So written in about 63, 64, published in 65. I mean, this is very much in the consciousness of the world at that stage. And actually, I think the afterword by that I have in mind talks about Dick, who basically thought that by the 1970s, the nuclear war would have happened. It seemed inevitable to him at that stage that this was going to happen. So he was trying to predict actually what would happen in some ways, more so than maybe in some of his other books. And it does read well as a story, and it does kind of make its own internal logic by the end of the book. But the first time you come across some of the things that happen in the book, you're like, well, how did we get here? Like, this. How did we make this jump? This seemed like to be a normal society, but now I have to deal with this. And somehow he manages to navigate his way around it. And at far end, we kind of come. You're sort of rooting for Bill at the end of it, like in a rather strange way. That this kind of this being that can kind of take over another being, which is often the very stuff of nightmares, has become somebody you're sort of rooting for because of the kind of craziness that Hoppy seems to have engendered in himself, and he's kind of got crazy with power and his influence at that stage. So there's a lot in the novel to kind of grab onto and either like or dislike. And I have to admit, I have no idea where I sit on how great the novel is kind of literally, but it is a fun ride, of that there's no doubt. And it's another one of those books, like all of the PKD books have been, they're always filled with fun in them. There's loads of really good ideas, and he's really got a good handle on what makes a good 200-page novel. In case 250, quite a bit longer than some of his other ones. It doesn't quite hit the same thematic depths as some of his other ones, but generally, I had a really good fun time with it.
Yeah.
So, do we start at the start and talk about the kind of the world before the bomb?
Well, I had a question about that, because it felt like that something had happened even before the start of the novel, because he and I don't know if he's referring to Hiroshima a little bit, you
Mm,
know, with the bombs going off there, but it feels like something else. Like there's already an alternate history happening before we even get to the point where the bombs really go off, and the apocalypse happens. So it's interesting that he chose that route, because he indicated that that Hoppy was already a victim of some kind of fallout,
Oh yeah.
with how he started. And it's interesting because um, you mentioned that by the end of the book, Hoppy's the bad guy, but I think at first there's a lot of sympathy for him, and there's a lot of buildup of his character in the beginning, with the whole getting the job at the hardware store, of overcoming that adversity that the people staring at, and the him being the underdog at that point, and really showing his stuff and repairing and what have you. So you get this big sympathy for him, and as the book goes on, I was kind of rooting for him.
yeah.
And he ends up living in the tower, and that's a big, a big symbol, right? The,
Hmm.
the ivory tower or what have you. He's so he ends up becoming king, and like Layla said, then his thirst for power kind of overcomes, and now then we start rooting for the other underdog. And so there's a lot of twists like that uh, PKD is playing with. He's playing with our heads, when when he does all that stuff. And that was very interesting.
Yeah, I think speaking of Hoppy, first the character reminds me actually of who's GRRM's character. Um,
Oh, Bryn,
no,
Tyrion.
Tyrion.
Tyrion, in that he's a character who's seen a lot of hard times, and we don't know the ends of the books yet, but GRM has said he sees Tyrion ultimately as a villain. So although the show portrayed him differently,
Very much
but
so.
I just kind of had that thought in my head as well, that you know he is playing with that. And yeah, at first I think Hoppy, I think his condition was because of thalidomide, which was a drug pregnant women in the 60s were told to take, and then it turned out that the drug caused birth defects. So there was
Okay.
so if this was published in the 60s, I think he was in some way drawing on that, because I wondered how did he get this idea, for this character. And yeah, drugs might have been part of it, but I feel like he was drawing from what was going on in the 60s, because there were the astronauts, there were, race relations. So we had Stewart
Yeah.
Right.
and then Hoppy, and then, oh, what's her name? Is it Beverly? The
Bonnie.
Bonnie.
Bonnie, yeah,
Yeah.
who was like this emerging liberated woman. So I kind of felt like he was drawing from all that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
to varying degrees of success. And that also kind of had all of them as sort of, you know, uh, others in society, so to speak, outliers in one way or another. Like Stewart was part of the community, but before the bomb, kind of, still on the periphery. They kept referring to his race and that kind of thing in the book. So, but back to Hoppy, I thought he was a great character, um, because assumed his he did assume he belonged, and they did accept him as he was accepted as uh, a member of the workplace. He was hired. One thing they didn't give him any, help actually. I think they said it was in the basement and it wasn't quite explained, or I didn't quite get how he got down,
Yeah, he
back
didn't
up. And,
explain that very well.
but it did say that it's like that part was ignored. Like they didn't really give him a way to get down there. He still had to struggle to do it himself. But then his prophecies, everyone gathered around and listened, and you know, um, so I don't know. I just saw um, Hoppy is playing a role that showed us how the other characters were before. I mean, they were willing to accept him as part of the group, and then afterward, he became even more because of his abilities. You know,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, he turned evil, and Stuart. I thought I thought Stuart was a great character, um, and probably the most stable person in the whole in the whole book.
You mean the guy eating raw rats?
Yeah, yeah, the guy eating rats.
That's the most stable.
Yeah.
I love that part because Hoppy did prophesy that he'd be eating raw rats someday. But they all did what they had to do to survive. I think I think what I'm trying to get at is a lot of these characters had some kind of barrier or boundary they were trying to overcome. And the astronaut, even, he was the ultimate in that situation. Um, and, uh, yet he did make the best of his situation in a way. I don't know. Um,
I love his name, Dangerfield.
Dangerfield. Right,
It's
right, right,
it's
right.
so space adventure-y,
Yeah.
Right. And I can see PKD in the 60s sitting there watching these astronauts and thinking,
Mm.
oh, here are these dashing, heroes, but what if they get up there and something goes wrong? So I'd say, I mean, I like all the characters for different reasons, but I really did like the astronaut because that kind of symbolized what everybody else was going through. Everybody kind of felt like they didn't quite fit in one way or another. Um, and the astronaut, too, really symbolized like the last vestiges of civilization.
Yeah.
Mm.
He kept
Yep.
playing all the old songs and reading the literature, and they were so terrified to lose him because that was like losing the last vestiges of civilization. So those are just some more of my thoughts about
Yeah.
why I liked it. I thought those were all kind of unique twists that just made you think a little more about. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Love all of those. Lila, I hadn't actually realized some of them in terms of like how much each character sort of symbolized big social issue at the time. Even the character Jim Ferguson, who owns the store at the start, is sort of seen as a very liberal person. He has the handicapped person, he has the black person working for him. Even him in his own right
yeah,
of these people that were going to kind of be pillars of society and kind of get his rewards for it. And he ended up getting killed of it. I sort of feel like the book talks about the kind of precipice of advancement that we are at. Like you say, Dangerfield is as a guy that was taken off and is in space, very much the pinnacle of human achievement at that time. It's what sort of um, the 60s were about, is this race to space, and doing so the Americans or the Russians would prove to be the strongest race in the world, so to speak. This kind of superiority over everybody else of how far humanity's come, and yet the threat of nuclear weapons, etc. In one hand, is again another incredible advancement of science, but it is a precipice that if we don't kind of manage it right, could be the end of everything, and we could have our man stranded in space with nowhere to go, can't come home, can't go any further, because that's really about as far as humanity had gotten at that stage, if you know what I mean. And I really love the symbolism of Dangerfield in that case. And
Yeah.
then for him to be this beacon that would travel around the orbit of the world and kind of appear back over the same places and read
Yeah.
those stories and kind of get communicate, almost like the he'd read the agony aunt meal, the meal, and all of that kind of stuff. It was very much speaking of a much older time and a simpler time with that. Even things like the cigarettes and the brandy and that kind of stuff were the real pleasures of life in this new world. But in the world that they left behind was not. But like Jared said, the book is sort of teeming with this kind of weirdness before the bomb goes off. Even from Hoppy's character when he gets drunk and he has the premonitions of it, and the fact that everybody's sort of mesmerized by him, and when he says to Stuart that he's going to be eating rats, even though Stuart has only heard that literally hours before or days before it actually happens, he had no memory and he couldn't see himself. And it was, again, this precipice of himself, like, we don't know what we're going to be capable of or what we're going to do, depending on circumstances. Anybody can be capable of anything. And he was horrified by that idea at one stage. And yet, at the moment when he was doing it, it was a need and it was a reason to survive and that kind of stuff. So, again, there was lots of that thematic stuff kind of rippled through the story without it necessarily being a line in the page that PKD wrote down and says, I'm going to beat you over the head with this. It was very much kind of just written in between the lines, which for me is the stuff that I really like about PKD's because interweaves these kind of questions in to the stories about religion or something that can be in DeAndre's dream, or the surveillance and the thought of self and Scanner Darkly, etc. There are all sorts of things within there. But yet the bomb does go off, and when the bomb goes off, you're stuck in this bit between how do you live and survive after that, and then we also have this character of Jack Tree, Bruno himself, that thinks he's responsible for it. And actually, one of the big questions I have actually about the entire book is: was Bruno responsible, or was it always Hoppy?
Don't know.
Is there any clarity on that? Because I was thinking, God, somebody went off and they do kind of play with this idea that it might have been Bruno because he tries to will it, doesn't he? And there are explosions that happen at that stage. And even the act of where the weapons come from is literally they destroyed themselves. They are American satellites and they kind of they killed themselves. Again, this sort of precipice of advancement that we had in that case. But it might have been Hobby because they often say when you look at a crime, you look to see who benefits most from a crime. And then look to see what happened. And it does seem like Hoppy was in a long drawn out plan to kind of he just wanted to belong to start off with. And then once he got there, he wanted to keep on advancing and stuff. So it is. I think it is an interesting question. The answer within the book.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, there's a lot of irony in this book. You have, Stuart. He had the prophecy that he's going to be eating rats. He ends up eating rats, and then he ends up becoming a rat catcher, seller.
That's right.
Of of traps and stuff like that.
A very elaborate trap, actually, as it turns out. When they went to it wasn't just they put cheese in. No, it was chasing rats around
around because the rats became intelligent, So and so and he has this vendetta against them. He hates them. So it's kind of like the irony is just laced on itself there with just that character. Never mind the other characters, who like one character I actually really liked was Bonnie. I thought her character was great, and I didn't agree with all the things that she did and she said, but I was just like, wow, but that just fits, what she's doing and how she's living, and her viewpoints were just, they could be taken as not the right thing to do, but on the other hand, what's the right, like you said, we don't know what we're capable of in these situations until they happen. And so I just found her viewpoint almost immediate need rather than looking to the future, rather than looking to the past. Her viewpoint was always immediate need, and you can't really fault her for that. You know, you can say, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that," or I disagree with what she just did." But when you really look at it, you can't really fault her. And I just love how he wove that character and wove part of the story around that character, as we moved along. And yeah, and like you said, there's a lot of characters in this, but he seems to juggle them very well.
Yeah, that's the thing. I saw Bonnie as I don't know, in an odd way, a voice of reason at some. I mean,
Sometimes, yeah.
she saw through to what was really going on, but then he raises ethical questions, around her behavior, but her desire to get rid of Hoppy at one point, like she was like, we know where this is going. We need to, kill him or whatever. Um, and she's not wrong, but at the same time, that that's unethical, that's immoral to do such a thing, to say, well, this person has the potential to do this, therefore we need to get rid of them. And so that's sort of I think that's an essential question. It kind of relates too to the whole nuclear question.
Mm.
Dr. Blood Money, or what is the name of the is it blue
Bluth, Bruno Bluthfield or Bluth something. Bluth
yeah
Gales. Bluth Gales.
yeah you know well, he's a character on his own to talk about, but
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing. I mean, he created these. Would the world have been better off if he weren't, if we didn't have him either?
Yeah.
So it just kind of he's using Bonnie to start those questions. I think that's
Yeah.
very interesting. I did, and the thing about the rats, that's the type of quirks I like. I like that here's this character, starts off, and has this premonition. I mean, has this prophecy made about him, and next thing you know, here's his was really saving his life. He's now making good money. you know.
Yeah.
So I just love all the twists and turns there, and even with Hoppy, going back to the times, I almost feel like that was including Hoppy and the reasons why he was disabled was really bringing in a social issue, that people needed to be aware of, that basically pregnant women were harmed by, and their children most definitely were harmed by bad use of, or uninformed use of drugs.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah. And one other thing I wanted to say, the astronaut Dangerfield, he and his wife, I read it as they were really supposed to be the Adam and Eve of Mars,
Oh, yeah.
because weren't they launched to go to Mars and set up
Oh man.
a place on Mars?
Yeah.
So nuclear weapons again, blocked that, seemingly even religious. There's a religious connotation there
Mm-hmm.
that nuclear weapons took away.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's why I feel like it's a masterwork. I mean, if you follow every thread, you start to find these ethical dilemmas and moral dilemmas, and some real comments on society at the times, and maybe now. But that's something I wonder. Do you find that it's what he had to say is applicable today?
Oh, I mean, I think that's PKD's enduring legacy in things, and I think it's interesting that he died just before Blade Runner came out, and the film Blade Runner is portrayed as one ethical quandary. Although I think the book has about five or six more that are not even explained in that book, which is where great power comes from. But those kind of questions, and just I think classic sci-fi in general, I think this is the reason that we're still going 32 books strong, is because classic sci-fi in these 200 page books, by and large, contain so much relevance for today. They contain things ponder over because the issues are exactly the same as they were. Issues are exactly the same as they were kind of 50 years ago, maybe even 100 years ago, and these issues are still prevalent today. And what somebody would take 600 pages to do today, these books did in such a much more kind of small scale thing. And the real power of these books is the fact that they can tell interesting stories, but have these things when you pull at them and discuss them that they're so rich thematically then to come go and explore. And it's like I can make the joke that we've read an awful lot of PKD, but I can't think of a bad one that we've read at all yet. There hasn't been for me anyway. And if you don't like his writing, I mean that's absolutely fine. Like I totally get that. But for me, if you like one of his books, I've got something out of them all.
Yeah, it's interesting. Um, yeah, and just going back to the you mentioned you guys mentioned the commentary on religion as well, and I
Mhm.
found that very fascinating, especially when it came to the character of Bill, because he's talking to all these people down below,
Yes.
and I just like the imagery of that, where this this creature of the bomb basically
Hmm.
uh, is in touch with hell, and how we've with the advent of nuclear weapons we've created the high potential for hell on earth, and this and now this creature who was created as, because of the radiation of the bomb, and how his sister was born and with him inside her, um, is basically in touch with hell in a metaphorical way, maybe even
Hmm.
more literal depending upon how you interpret it. But uh, and so I found that interesting, and I've also found it interesting how you mentioned Dangerfield was uh, was basically the representative of heaven,
Hmm.
in a metaphorical sense,
Great point.
with his looking down on earth, and Hoppy is kind of in his Tower of Babel, reaching up to the heavens, bringing heaven down, trying to topple it, and so there's all that religious symbolism going on with Christian religion symbolism, I should specify,
Hmm.
going on that is in play there with Hoppy trying to topple heaven, trying to take it over, and Bill in touch with hell, talking to basically down below, and also at odds with Hoppy. And so there's a lot of that in there. I'm sure there's a lot more that PKD drew on that
Hmm.
I'm not even referencing right there as far as that religion angle goes, but it's in there, and I think it's something that could be studied a little deeper in this book.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Bill now, I did see him. I mentally compared him to Dangerfield in that they were both locked in this
Mm.
situation. So what you have to say, what you said kind of relates to that too, I think. There was the representation of heaven and representation of hell, and they're both locked within this capsule, so to speak.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
but then Bill's sister, I thought it was interesting how I really felt I cringed at how cruel his Bill's sister was to him, like putting him in a worm. And I mean, that's the cruelty of children, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sort of representing how, I mean, even though they were sharing the same body and seemingly would have somewhat similar, I don't know, experience, same parents, but no, there's always going to be that separation,
Mhm.
between siblings, between humans. There's, we're never going to quite be able to empathize. Um, Although she probably would have been very sad if she had lost Bill,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
For sure.
Yeah. So, I just found that again another chance to sit back and think, okay, wait a minute, this is so cruel, and at the same time, Bonnie is just kind of ignoring both of
Mhm.
them, you know, although she's not really quite sure what's up with the Bill situation. um, so again, just that separation and boundary that none of us can overcome, no matter what circumstance we're in. I mean,
Yeah.
that's sort of a message I'm getting out of the whole book too.
Oh yeah.
And I thought he did
Well,
that pretty well. Yeah.
yeah. We brought up like the ethical conundrum of Bonnie and how
Mhm.
she treats her kid and how she treats her husband, and but also what about Dr. Stillwell, who, like, what doctor would not tell the parents of their patient what's going on with their
But
patient?
yeah.
Right.
There's an ethical problem there too,
Yeah.
and so it's and PKD just throws the stuff in there, and and then moves on to the next thing,
Right.
and you're like, you don't even have time because it's a very fast paced novel, so you don't even have time to really register that and think about it
That's true.
when you before you're moving on to the next thing. But I was just like, yeah, I don't think that's how a doctor's supposed to act. But then
Yeah.
I had to keep going, you know.
But I think that it sort of says about how the world has changed.
Yeah,
The kind of social constructs have broken down in some ways because, I mean, the doctor, again, at the start of the book, he's a psychiatrist. Again, not a very common thing, 1960s USA, as being somebody to go and see. But that becomes a GP kind of sorts at the end. Um, but then, I mean, Bill as a character, I couldn't help but read him as a Stephen King character. He's very much like something that's in the basis of most Stephen King books, to be perfectly honest, this kind of inner second voice that has a MacGuffin-like state to it, in that their powers are sort of limitless and are able to provide us more meaning and development of the story than would be physically possible. So that conversation was down below, and then ultimately becomes the MacGuffin of he's unable to have it and take over other bodies at that stage. And when he does it, kind of at the end, kind of Hoppy is left as a husk and a shed in the skin and all of that kind of stuff at the end of it. And it's like, okay, well, there's a resolution of the story that nobody could have predicted from like page 20.
Right.
There was nothing in it at that stage that could
yeah,
suggest that anything can happen. But the rules of engagement of the entire society are broken down. And similarly, as you said about Bonnie, Bonnie again is such a progressive character because she's the one that doesn't accept that things have to be the way that they are.
yeah,
Yeah.
She's looking for the better life. She's the one, and it's okay, she's using her sexuality to do it, but she's using what she has, if you know what I mean, within that societal construct for her own advancement or her own happiness or whatever she's looking for at that time. And when she can escape, she can. Whereas there's other ones who are looking to make their name within the community, whether that's Hoppy, you get June Robb, even Eldon Blaine when he comes to take Hoppy from one settlement and bring it to the other one, trying to do that to kind of use other people to kind of elevate their own status within society. Whereas, Bonnie is sort of looking after herself in some ways. She's not even really worried about her kids. A very, I would imagine, very anti-1960s ideal for a mother as it is, but also can make sense. It turns out our kids can take care of themselves more than amply without her. In fact, they have some sort of superpowers and sort of things going on that they don't know of. So I just find the whole situation of all the different characters really interesting about how he kind of put them all on the page and gave them all names and gave them all characters and give them kind of all ways that they feed off each other and still stay true to kind of the person that they represent. There's not really many people have a story arc. Hoppy has a story arc. Stuart doesn't really get a story arc. He sort of stays the same person the whole way along. He just kind of moves from place to place, kind of looking for work and trying to do a bit himself. But Hoppy has this kind of progression that himself. He changes from the start to the end of the book. Dangerfield doesn't really change, for everything that happens in there. But I just feel like the book tries to give this impression of like everything's changed now, and anything kind of goes in this new society. What civilization is now is not what civilization was beforehand.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny how he even uses some of the minor characters to try to point out this change by, like one of the characters from the other town, I forget the name of it, but that came to West Marin. It was Eldon, I think his name.
Eldon Blaine, yeah.
Yeah, he was like, oh wow, they have two radio transistors and we got none. That's not fair.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me of like stories like the lottery and stuff where the people just yell out, "It's not fair," but then we'd never get anything else from Eldon. He was just there to point out that little incongruency and that major change compared to how life was before. He's like, they're living like it was before the bomb, and we're not, And
except they're not really. These are
not
minor
really.
differences, and it's with that sort of connection to God or the deity that they're kind of seeing. But everybody will see about what they do not have and compare it to themselves, and I'm be like, God, wouldn't my life be so much better if that one thing? And again, you can talk about social constructs of society at the moment, but there's an awful lot of that whatabouterism of what other people are getting, what we're not, etc. In today's society. Again, I mean, it's pretty much the same idea that Eldon's kind of portraying in this story. My life would be better if one thing would change. And
if I had that radio.
If I had that one thing, my life would be so much better. And it's very rarely true, as we know, because obviously, disharmony and dissatisfaction is more deep rooted than one thing. But it is an interesting perspective to come, because he does come to steal Hoppy. And I think that at that part of the story, Hoppy is still a sympathetic character, because we want him to have agency. We want him to have decisions over himself about what he wants to do. And it ultimately means, I mean, I didn't think it at the time in the book, but I just find Hoppy a very tragic character kind of after I finished the book. And very sad is that because he was sort of downtrodden for so long in his life and people didn't see him, when they did see him, he didn't know where to stop. He looked at, in much the same way, he looked at Dangerfield as having more influence than he does. So he wanted to imitate Dangerfield and be Dangerfield and take him over that life, because he wanted to kind of keep elevating himself through society. And ultimately, I just think that's very sad, rather than accepting he had risen to a very important part of other people's lives and contributing that way.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. You mentioned Stillwell. You did, and I just wanted to come back to that and the idea of psychology and psychology trying to heal a nuclear physicist responsible for, and again, just looking at the era, as you said, Chris, psychiatry was not common, but it was kind of seen as an elite thing, or someone with more means and funds were more likely to seek out psychiatry.
It was an exploratory new field.
Yeah, but then the lesson is that didn't really solve anything. And, and the other part of that is, because I actually, have known people who kind of had that psychosis that, oh, my thoughts might bring my reality, which
Hmm.
in a way, yes, maybe that's true in a way for all of us. I mean, maybe that's the question. And I mean, as they say, if you think positive, sometimes you notice more opportunities than if you're
Yeah,
just sitting at
sure.
home mad at everything. But this was a whole other level of feeling like my thoughts implement things in the world. And I just feel like there's something there with him including the psychiatrist in this conversation. You know, just asking first, does psychiatry solve anything? Which probably not in the story. Um, and yeah, so I don't know. I just found like that was an interesting aspect of this. It didn't really stop anything, and ultimately he ended up, you know, even though he wasn't qualified, being the medical doctor, which was a far more useful
Yeah.
role, after the apocalypse, um, than being a psychiatrist, which I'm not sure I agree with really. I think a lot of those folks needed a little bit of therapy that could have helped.
I
They
was going to
all.
say it useful in inverted commas. Yeah, very much so in that way. I think again that character Jack Tree again. Jack Tree's a great pseudonym. It's a bit like Joe Chip and Ubik, another
Yeah.
great. He's a great way of putting kind of simple names together. But he was at the start of his psychiatric journey because I think we get an insight into him at the very start that he's kind of exploring this idea of his kind of own self importance and maybe his guilt about working in an area that could lead to the destruction of the world. And then while he's basically in the office, so to speak, the end of the world does happen. So he kind of it kind of validates that whole fear that he had about himself, and therefore it kind of runs away. And he has this bit of, oh God, if only I didn't exist. But
Mhm.
what he's really saying when he says, if only I didn't exist, the world would not have this problems, it basically says I'm important within this world. That's really what he's saying himself. It's a build-up of himself and of his ego to say, look how important I am to this world, and oh God, it'd be better if I wasn't here, but actually I am here, and the world is in threat because of me. And he's convinced of it at that time, and he's convinced that he is at the center of it all, but he didn't really get any treatment, if you know, you know what I mean. At the time, he already had those pre-existing thoughts, and the bomb going off when he validated and amplified those kind of thoughts for him. So I think he's really interesting in terms of a character and an experience of that kind of psychosis, so to speak,
Yeah.
that kind of trauma and how that manifested. But also, I mean, his death in the book's an absolute belter. I mean, it's so good. I mean, he just gets plucked up, chucked up in the earth, spun around about 20 times, and then slammed back down the earth. I mean, it's a great piece of writing. I mean, I'm surprised it hasn't been copied more often in film and TV.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you wonder, you look at the influences and stuff, because that part of the story of Hoppy's abilities and Bill's abilities, that reminded me of like More Than Human, that the
Mm,
book we've
yeah,
read on Sci-Fi Masterworks
absolutely.
here, and then of course the post-apocalypse stuff reminded me of Earth Abides. So there's it's amazing the influences and what people take from and or what they're trying to put their spin on and stuff like that. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It is, and I also had to notice the location of these communities, which was in Northern California or around the San Francisco area.
Yeah.
And there's what is it, Parable of the Sower. I was
Hmm.
kind of comparing it to that
Hmm.
too,
For sure.
um, and just I don't know why. There's a film that's popped in my head too. Now I can't think, an apocalypse film, but I just I just wonder why. I don't know. Was PKD native to that area? Is that why he focused on
I don't know.
that society? Um, I don't know. I don't know why I guess I just wondered why that culture, that society that he decided, and not New
Yeah.
York, not New York, not a targeted area that definitely would have you know
Yeah.
had the
Well,
means.
I'm reading the back of the book. He was born in Chicago, lived in California, so that is not
Oh,
something that he would have necessarily had a lot of experience with. Although it is, on reflection, sort of symptomatic of the Dust Bowl, etc. That kind of society. I certainly get that feel of it from after the Depression. So maybe he was trying to mirror that, like the stuff that Steinbeck wrote about, etc. It has a sort of feeling
oh yeah,
of that about it. Now that you've mentioned it, I didn't think of it at the time, but it definitely kind of has that feeling. It's really interesting, Neil. Yeah, but
yeah. I
you
just
should.
wonder why all. I'm not going to say all, but it's interesting that the books I like the most tend to locate the apocalypse in
Yeah.
uh, Northern California. I don't know why.
Well,
Oh,
to be fair, North the Earth Abides is similar, and like it doesn't really. It's less interesting to see about apocalypses in cities within civilizations, so to speak, between organized kind of systems, and let people start again. And it'd be much more interesting to see people without the kind of mechanisms of society around them, like running water might have been. How do you build again? How do you start again? That's why dystopia as a genre, well, it'll never end because you create a starting point. There are any amount of opportunities that come there, and you can explore it in many different ways. And it'll always be a fascinating genre to me. I have to say, like as soon as you get a dystopian setting, my ears prick up, like it did in this book, because it was like the start of the book was like, oh, I don't really know, have a sense of what the story is, and as soon as the nuclear bomb goes off, and it's like, now I'm at home. I have a sort of a sense of where this story could go. I mean, like I say, I didn't predict kind of the super long arms and the demon baby fetus, but within the dystopia setting, it sort of makes sense in some way.
As
yeah.
much as we can, make sense of it.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts or anything else you want to bring up? We've kind of danced around an awful lot of the book there, which is, I have to say, it's moved up. It was good to very good in my estimation, and Dale has done a much better job of influencing me in an upward trend and direction than downwards, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. I yeah, I'm pretty solid in the very good range there. I like it was a good book. I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
I'm going to stay with Masterwork just because I think it's actually uh, playing on that level of when it was published,
Hmm.
and just helping me think a little more about what the society was, and what some of the things may have just been resting at the top of his mind. I mean, I do get the sense that he was like, oh, I've heard about this and this and this. Let me just put all these
Put it all
folks
together.
in the same room together and see what happens. Um, but then again, today it does have some lasting lessons and things to think about. So I'm going to stick with Masterwork.
Yeah, yeah, and I do think like PKD, because his books are so strong thematically. I think they're the kind of books that only get better upon more readings, if that makes sense. As you kind of strip back the story and see the themes and the societal things that they're talking about more. I can definitely attest to having read like Do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep a couple of times now, and every time I read it, it jumps up another little notch because I see kind of what he's talking about a little more than he was beforehand. But really fascinating. Next up for us is the Brian Aldiss book, Non-Stop, our first Brian Aldiss book, a name that I'd heard of. I don't even think I don't think we've read a short story by Brian Aldiss either. I don't believe so. I
I,
could have that wrong.
no, I think
Uh,
there was one in
was there one? Okay.
the
Yeah.
Big Book of Science Fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, we were making our way through. And the book after that is the first by Arthur C. Clarke, which is The Fountains of Paradise, which
Nice.
I'm very Just looking forward to getting to as well. If anybody would like to join us for any of those conversations, you can go to the PageTune forums, the pagetune.com/forums, and you can sign up there. This is not a closed group at all. We keep on adding and losing people as it goes. We might have a couple of the regulars back for next time. But until then, where can we find you, Jared?
You can find me at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel. You can find me on the podcast Speculative Speculations. And you can find me on panel chewing through the Page Chewing forums and film chewing through the Page Chewing forums as well.
Yeah, excellent. And Leila?
You can find me on Instagram at Validity Magazine.
Oh. And you can find me at the Chronicle of Chris YouTube channel sometimes, but mostly on a lot of the podcasts that Jared described there as well. It's kind of described our weekend in a nutshell there of what we're doing this weekend, which is quite nice. And I hope you can join us for the next book, which is Brian Aldiss' Nonstop. Okay, thanks everybody. And we'll speak to you again soon. Take care. All the best.